Hi, I'm Ryan Baker, and this is Big Data Education. Today we're going to continue our discussion of discovery with models by providing a case study that's a little different than the previous ones we've seen in class. In this case, it's work by Dawson, McFadden, and colleagues to study the relationship between social network metrics and admission practices in medical schools. This is an example of discovery with models and relationship mining. The goal of their analysis was to try to understand which attributes of a medical school candidate at the time of application to the medical school are predictive of successful participation in the emerging community of practice during medical school. And that would be towards the goal of evaluating medical school applicants for modern medicine, where communication and community participation are key. So the big idea of this is we know that we care about things about a doctor beyond just how much they know. And one of those things is participation in community of practice. And we might be able to tell this from their participation in the news groups and in the discussion forums of the course they're taking. And can we see how that correlates to what we know about them before we admit them at all, towards admitting the right people to become doctors? The challenge is, how do we measure participation in the community of practice? And the idea was to take multiple measures of student participation in discussion forums within the medical school LMS. So we don't really know what the right indicator of participation in the community is, so we'll take a few of them. Now, Dawson, McFadden, and colleagues tried several measures. The first was nodal degree, the number of relationships the student had to other students in the course social network within the LMS. Another one is closeness, the distance in communication to all the other students. Betweenness, is it a student that kind of connects other students, other parts of the graph? And eigenvector centrality, which is an individual student's contribution overall to the community. The data about the students they had at the time of admission was prior course grades, standardized exam scores on the medical exam, a portfolio, and an interview, which was a set of rigorous mini-interviews with standardized questions that assess critical thinking, decision-making, communication skill, leadership, and knowledge of healthcare. What Dawson, McFadden, and colleagues found was that there were no significant correlations between the social network measures and GPA or the GAMSAT. So in other words, how students behaved in interacting with other students in the course didn't correlate to how well they did in previous courses or how well they did on the medical exam. Also, there were generally not significant correlations between the social network measures and their portfolio. However, the social network measures and interviews did have some good correlations, including closeness, correlation of the interview score and closeness of 0.311, and the eigenvector and the interviews of 0.152. More results included the admissions criteria and class grades during medical schools. So the interviews better predicted class grades than either the GPA or the GAMSAT did, but the GPA and GAMSAT were predictive of this. So in other words, GPA and GAMSAT are predictive of how well you do in medical school, but not predictive of how well you take part in the social network as manifested in the learning management system and the discussion forums. So the conclusion that they came to was that an interview is a better predictor of both grades and participation in the medical school social network than other measures. So in other words, let's not get rid of interviews. There are a lot of medical schools that are now saying, let's completely just go to tests and GPA. But Dawson, McFadden, and colleagues said this is evidence that we really want to keep interviews in the medical school admissions process because they measure something we care about that's not measured by any of the other measures, which is how much do they participate in the social network of the medical school in the LMS discussion forums. So this is an interesting point, by the way. What they're doing here is using measures that can be distilled from data quickly. And I want to point out that the original developers of all these social network measures were not thinking about predicting who was going to be good in medical school. With discovery with models, you can answer research questions that were never considered by the original developers of those measures. That's certainly true in a lot of the other work I've seen as well. And this, in my viewpoint, is discovery with models at its best. So in the next lecture, I'll discuss text mining. I'm Ryan Baker. Thank you very much.